Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the course of English for Academic Communication in Lecture 3 with me, Maria Dewi Rosari from Jakarta International University. We are now in Unit 3 or Chapter 3, and the topic of this lecture is small group setting. Well, actually, the topic for week 3 or Lecture 3 and 4 is the same, which is small group setting 1. But we have different focus. For this lecture 3 is about the language mechanics and strategies, while later in lecture 4, it's small group setting 1 still, but it will be about the application activities and further application techniques of it. Before we find out the material for this lecture 3, let's see the learning objectives that you will have in this lecture. So as you can see here, there are 3 main sections in this lecture 3. The first one is unit introduction. So every time we enter a new unit, I will try to provide the introduction of the unit so you know what to expect and what to learn during the unit of the lecture. And then number 2 is about the mechanics of the language. I believe you already know what the mechanics of language is about. It's about the expressions on how to carry out the functions of the academic communication. And for this mechanics of language, we have 4 subtopics, which are asking for repetition, seeking clarification or elaboration, paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding, and clarifying your comment by putting it in other words. And then after the mechanics of the language, we have strategies for success. There are 3 subtopics for that, which are introducing oneself to a group, tips on asking questions, and more tips on participating in small group setting. So as I said in the previous lecture, this course is designed to help you improve your ability in English for academic communications from a very small setting to the larger ones. In the previous lecture, we discussed about the interpersonal communication, how to engage in that. And now we will try to make it a bit bigger. The setting is a bit bigger. It's about involving in a small group setting 1. And then as the time goes by, as you move to another lecture of this course, you will see the bigger setting of English for academic communication. Well, without further ado, let's start this course about small group setting 1, about the language mechanics and strategies. Oops, before we start studying the materials, let me provide you with ice breaking for a while. Please grab your pen, your notebook, or you can use your phone to write down your answers or take notes, right? I have some questions for you to answer, and please reflect on that and recall your memories about that, okay? The first one is, what are your top challenges when you are attending group discussion or seminar discussions? The challenges can come from many situations. It can be about getting new acquaintances, or when you need to ask question, or when you need to start a discussion with another participant, or when you need to present your own. Well, many things, many challenges. But if you can, please relate that to your involvement in a small group discussion, right? At least provide 5 challenges, the top ones. I believe that there are so many challenges that we usually encounter, right, when attending group or seminar discussion, but just list down the top 5. Pause this video if you think you need more time to answer this question. Whenever you're finished, let's continue. Some of the top challenges that students have mentioned facing in group or seminar discussions include the following. So please check the list. Are they also the ones you listed previously? Number 1 is shyness. When you feel shy to For example, to express your opinion, to express your question, or start a discussion, for example. Then lack of self-confidence. You are not confident enough to share thoughts, for example. Number 3, uneasiness about taking the initiative. You still remember about how culture influences us in an academic communication involvement, right? Some people from a certain cultural group feels uncomfortable in taking initiative. It's just not their custom or their culture. But in some other cultural groups, it is very encouraged to take initiative, to take the lead, to show initiative, right? So do you experience the same thing too? Next one, lack of relevant knowledge of the subject or issue. You may be involved in a academic discussion, academic seminar, but although the topic of the seminar or the discussion is something that you are interested in, but maybe you still have many things that you haven't learned, right? So you feel that you are lacking of relevant knowledge, and it somehow influences your self-confidence. Then the need to construct logically ordered arguments, or when you think you need to construct logically ordered questions or opinions, that can also be possible. The next one, being assessed academically. And the last one, and persistent talkers' monopolization of time, right? So there are 7 top challenges that students have mentioned. How about you? Which one are also your top challenges, and which one that, although they are mentioned as top challenges for other students, are not that problematic for you? All right, still about the icebreaking section, but for this one, it's not about question, but some notes to you if you are using this material as learners, and if you are using this material as instructor or professors. If you are learners, please answer these questions. Do you share some of those challenges, the challenges that I mentioned previously? What is one thing that you can try in order to overcome the challenges that you have identified? So it's another self-reflection question, right? So you know you have identified the challenges or the common problems, right? But have you ever thought of the way to overcome it or to prevent it to happen again in the future involvement of yours in an academic communication setting? So those are the questions that you need to answer if you are a learners. And if you are an instructors or teachers or professors using this material, here are the notes for you. Encourage students to identify and share their personal challenges. The sharing serves 3 important functions, which are: it can clearly demonstrate that they are not alone in facing these challenges, and it's very important. If they know that their friends also face the same challenges and issues, they may feel more comfortable in learning the materials and also in learning new things related to this topic, right? And it doesn't discourage them, even it can encourage them, and it can even motivate them to learn more about this topic or material. It leads nicely to having them work together to generate strategies that might help them overcome these common difficulties. And the last one, it fosters a learner community of open sharing and support, right? So if your students know that they share common challenges with their friends, they can share their experiences, or maybe share how to overcome those challenges, and they can support each other. That's a good thing to have, right? And this is one last note for you if you're using this material as instructors. Before you start conducting the material or the teaching of using this material, you may review a bit about cultural factors that are relatable to the material of this lecture 3, which are individualism versus collectivism, masculinity and femininity, and also silence. You can review these cultural factors in the material of lecture 1. I already discussed those things: individualism, collectivism, masculinity, femininity, and silence in that lecture. Or you may have a, like a short quiz in reviewing them before you go further with the material of this lecture 3. If you already covered these notes, let's start the first section of this material with the unit introduction. Lectures 3 and 4, this lecture and the following lecture, center on participation in small group settings, with lecture 3 focusing on building mechanics and strategic competence involved in asking questions. So in small group setting 1, I focus on how to ask proper questions in the different or various situations. For next one, I have a question for you to answer. What do you think what small group setting is? What is small group? What makes it small, or what makes it different with other group settings? What is the importance of participating in small group settings? Or because it's just small, so it's not that important or not that essential compared to participating in big group settings? Well, the importance of participating in small group settings needs no further emphasis. Academic conversation among people who share a common interest helps broaden, strengthen, and deepen their understanding. So although the group discussion is just small, it doesn't mean that it's not significant for students. It's still significant because small group setting can instead provide a more intense discussion, right? Because the people are just a few compared to bigger ones. Not only is one's participation often evaluated as part of a course grade, but one's ability to contribute to the dialogue also will be noted in settings where participation is not being formally evaluated. For example, the quality of your participation in group settings may influence the references that your professors will later write for you in support of your job application. So what does it mean with this? So small group setting or participation in small group setting is not only like when it involves different institutions like academic seminar like that, but it can also happen in the class. And when you are able to participate in this small group setting, it can give a deeper picture to your professor about your ability, about your performance, about your mastery of English language and English skills. And later one day, if you already graduate and you need the professor to write down a letter of reference for you, your professor knows a lot and knows a lot to write in your letter, and it will influence and it can ease your job application as well. But on the contrary, if you don't really participate in group settings in the class, your professor doesn't really know your ability, right? And when later you need your professor to write down a letter of recommendation for your job application, it won't speak much about you. In addition, the skill you demonstrate at engaging others provides a glimpse into how you deal with others in a group setting. So it's not only about your, hard skill, about your English language, about your vocabulary or grammar or communication skill, but it's also about your soft skill, how you deal with others, how can you cope with other people in a group settings, in a group discussion, when you need to ask question and you need to start a conversation. Can you do it politely? Can you do it properly, right? This skill is important because collaborative work in courses and research is on the increase. your professional relationship and ongoing discussions outside the classroom with your fellow classmates, potential collaborators, and future colleagues are also fostered. Next one. Before we enter the second section about the mechanics of the language involved in small group setting, let me ask you this question. When you need to participate in small group settings, what do you think are the skills needed there? Please list down at least 5 skills that you think are important to master or to have when participating in small group settings. Pause this video if you think you need a long time to answer this question, but whenever you're finished, let's continue the discussion. The skills involved in participating in small group settings involve a complex set of habits and attitudes that might be deeply ingrained, right? And as such, it's important to explore various hidden assumptions related to group participation. So although it's just about participating in a small group setting, but the involvement of the skills is not small. It's not something small. It's even a complex thing, right? This exploration is followed by the coverage of mechanics and strategies pertaining to asking various types of questions. So questions that need to be asked during a involvement in a small group setting is not just 1 or 2 types. There are various types of it. And we need to understand it so that we can use the right question in the proper situation. And then after we learned about the mechanics of the language or how to ask questions in various types of situation, there will be 2 classroom tested application activities that promote the development of one's ability to pose questions. And this unit then concludes with some suggestions of strategies for success, including self-introduction to a group, and tips on asking questions and participating effectively in small group settings. So that's the introduction about this unit or this lecture, right? I hope that you know the bigger picture of what this lecture will be about, right? And now let's move on to the next section, which is about mastering the mechanics of the language that are needed for small group setting 1. So ladies and gentlemen, this lecture is about participating in group settings, and the language focus here first deals with mastering different types of questions, such as asking for repetition, seeking clarification or elaboration, paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding, and clarifying your comment by putting it in other words. So as you can see, there are 4 types of questions, and each of which carries different purpose, right? Different needs. This kind of language can be considered as serving functional purposes, like I said previously. Familiarization with the following expressions will free up the thinking time that is needed to generate and formulate the content-based questions as the discussion unfolds moment by moment. And here are some commonly used phrases and expressions that serve various purposes. There are 4 types. And now let's start with the first one, which is asking for repetitions. What do we need to say when we need to ask for a repetition? Maybe just say, can you repeat that again? Could you please repeat that again? Or is there other expressions that we can use to have other people repeat what they just said? Let's find out. Section 2.1 is about asking for repetition. Well, before I reveal the expressions that we can use to ask for repetition, let me ask you this question. How do you usually ask for a repetition in a conversation? How do you usually request for a repetition in a conversation? What are the expressions that you usually use? Is it just, can you repeat it again, or pardon me, or what? List down at least 5 expressions that you usually use. You can start from the ones that you frequently use, and that's okay. But if you think you only have less than 5, say 3 or 4, that's okay too. Please do not click on the next content of this slide. I want you to recall your memory first, and I want you to list down and reflect on what you have mastered so far about the expressions for asking for repetition. Okay, if you are already finished with that, with listing down the expressions for asking for repetition in a conversation, let's see other expressions that you may have never seen before. Some commonly used expressions for request to someone to repeat are presented here. Yes. A simple request for repetition can serve multiple purposes. For example, you might not be 100% sure that you have heard an important point correctly. Repetition provides an opportunity to check your understanding. The request might serve as a compensation strategy that buys you some time to think about or formulate the responses to the statement just made. So the expressions about asking for repetition is not only for asking our speaking partner to repeat what they just said, but also to be a compensation strategy to give you some time to think of what's the best responses to whatever your speaking partner just said. So it serves many purposes, right? Now let's find the expressions. Sorry, pardon me, excuse me, would you mind saying or repeating that again? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said about. Sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I didn't follow what you said about. I am having some trouble understanding you. You were saying, excuse me, would you mind speaking a little more slowly, please? So it's a repetition because our speaking partner talked too fast. I'm sorry, could you repeat what you said about? I'm sorry, could you repeat the last point you made? So those are the examples of phrases that we can use to ask for repetitions. I believe that you have known or been familiar with some of the expressions, and I believe that some expressions are quite new to you. So I hope that when you need to involve yourself in a small group discussion, small group setting, you can vary your expression so that you are not only using the same expression again and again. Remember, asking for repetition expressions here are not only for just asking for repetition, but it can also serve a purpose of giving you time to, plan the responses that you need to give to your speaking partner. Now it's for you. Can you think of some other expressions that you can use for your for your need of asking for repetition? Please list down at least 5, right? And write it down in the yellow box. After you answer this question, please answer this question too. Which expressions do you usually use? So from the list of the expressions on the previous slide, please list down or identify which expression do you usually use, or the expressions that you have frequently used so far. And I want you to identify which expressions are new to you. So there are many expressions listed on the previous slide, right? So please, group them to the ones that you already know that you usually use and to the ones that are new to you. So you need to reflect on those lists, those expressions, right? And don't forget to add more expressions that you make your own. Pause this video because this slide will require you to spend some time on answering and completing those questions, right? Whenever you're ready, we can go to the next slide. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now let's move on to the next type of questions with the expressions that we need to master and taking a part in a small group setting. And it's about seeking clarification or elaboration. So sometimes in a small group setting or small group discussion, we need to clarify something, or we need to ask for other people to clarify what they just said, or ask them to elaborate the information that they just said further. And we will discuss the expressions that we can use now. But before I review the useful phrases that you can use, please answer this question. I want you to reflect on your experience so far, on your involvement in a small group discussion so far. And I want you to answer this question. How do you usually ask for a clarification or elaboration? What do you usually say? What do you usually express? Right, list down at least 5 expressions in the box, right? And this is very important because I want you to, to build a new knowledge on the knowledge that you have had, right? I believe that you have used at least 1 or 2 expression in asking for clarification or elaboration, right? So please recall your memory, recall your experience, and please list down the ones that you have used so far in the box. Do not go to the next content of this slide or the PowerPoint before you finish answering that question. But if you are finished, please move on to the next discussion. So in what kind of situation do we need to ask for clarification or elaboration? Of course, this kind of situation is the one happening in small group setting, right? Your participation in small group settings might at some point involve asking someone to explain a point further because there is something that you do not understand. And here are some expressions in seeking clarification or elaboration. Please repeat after me to practice how to say it about the intonation and pronunciation. The useful phrases are, you mentioned earlier that blah, blah, blah. Do you mean blah, blah, blah? It's to clarify something, right? What did you mean when you said, repeat after me. I didn't quite get what you meant by good. Could you please be more specific about good? Could you elaborate on the point you made about good? Could you explain your second point in more detail? Good. You might have already said this, but I wasn't sure what you meant when you said yes. The next one. I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean? Yep. Could you explain what you mean by? Yes. Sorry, but I'm not quite clear on the point you made about. Yep. Could you expand a little bit on what you said about? Yes. And the last one. Could you provide an example of? Right. So there are a lot of phrases here, right? Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 phrases, both for clarification and elaboration. Well, I believe there are many more expressions that we can use, right? So therefore, can you come up with some new ideas of the phrases that we can use to seek clarification or elaboration in small group setting? Please find out some other expressions, right? And please write it down in the yellow box. Maybe you can compose some new expressions, right? With new wordings, with new vocabulary, right? Or maybe the ones that you usually use that haven't been listed in the previous slide. If you have finished answering this question, I want you to go to the green box to answer the following questions. So there are two questions in the green box, the same questions as the previous slide, right? So from the list of expressions about seeking clarification or elaboration on the previous slide, I want you to group them into the expressions that you usually use, that you are already familiar, or that you have frequently used, right? And the second one is, I want you to list down the expressions that are new to you. Please group them, separate them, so that you know which ones are the ones have been mastered by you and which ones need further application in your involvement in small group setting. Pause this video for a while to give you enough time to answer these questions, right? Do not go to the next slide first. Do not skip this slide because this slide will help you reflect on your experience and on the new knowledge that you just learned. But whenever you're ready, you can go to the next slide. And this one is about paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding, right? So different type of question again. As usual, I will ask you this question. How do you usually paraphrase ideas to make sure you understand something correctly? What expressions do you usually use? What questions do you usually ask? What kind of statement do you usually use to confirm understanding? Right? In what kind of situation do you think we need to confirm understanding? Of course, kind of situation in small group setting. Next question is, what is actually paraphrasing? Have you ever heard of what paraphrasing is? And what is the use of it? To paraphrase is to say an idea in a different way by, for example, changing keywords or using different word forms or using the synonyms or using the antonyms and changing the sentence structure. For example, you change from active to passive one. Paraphrasing the point that you wish to address before you advance your own argument ensures that your argument is made based on an accurate understanding and interpretation of what was said. It also shows that you are exercising active listening, right? The one that we discussed in the previous lecture, as covered in the previous unit or previous lecture. So we need to know what paraphrasing is. Paraphrasing skill is not only essential in writing, but also in speaking like this. We can use our skill in paraphrasing to confirm our understanding when we are involved in a conversation. And here are the list of phrases that we can use in paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding. Please repeat after me. So what you're saying is that, good. Please correct me if I have misinterpreted your point. Are you saying that, good. So you mean that, good. Based on my understanding of the points that you just made, am I correct in assuming that, good. Let me just make sure. Your point is that, good. If I have understood you correctly, your point is that, good. The way I understand it, you are saying that, is that correct? Yes, good job. So those are the phrases that you can use to paraphrase ideas in order to confirm understanding. Let's move on to the next slide. And I have the same questions for you to answer regarding this section. Now, can you come up with new ideas, new expressions on how to paraphrase ideas to confirm understanding? Maybe you can construct new expressions, right? Or you may find new ways to paraphrase ideas to confirm understanding. After you answer that question, please answer these two questions as well. From the previous slide, I want you to analyze further. Which expressions on the previous slide do you usually use, or the expressions that you are already familiar, you already use in your involvement in small group setting? And also which expressions are new to you, it's a new addition to your repertoire. I want you to be able to group these two types of expressions, because I want you to reflect on your experience, reflect on what you have known so far regarding paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding expressions. Again, please pause this video if you think you need longer time to answer these questions. And please do not skip this slide so that you can provide yourself enough time, to reflect on yourself. This is a very important part in this course, because without reflecting on what you already know and what you need to know, it will be, more complicated to absorb the new knowledge, right? But whenever you're finished, let's go to the next slide, which is the last type of question that we need to master in participating in small group settings. Here it is. The last one is clarifying your comment by putting it in other words. The same question that I have asked you 3 times previously. How do you usually clarify your comment? Do you try to putting it in other words? And how do you do it? I believe you have done this before, even though this is not in a small group setting. Maybe it's just when you have a conversation with your friends or classmates, or when you have a short conversation with your professor. So that's okay to list down those kind of expressions in here. What is important here that you know what expressions serve what purpose first for this. In what kind of situation do you think we need to clarify our comment? Is it always needed to clarify our comment, or does it take a certain situations or conditions in which we need to clarify our comment? Then how can we put our comment in other words? What does it mean by putting it in other words? Well, there are times when you can detect that your listeners seem puzzled or lost when they're listening to you. You can tell from the facial expressions, from their body gesture, from non-verbal hints, right? When they are not understanding what you're saying. Assume responsibility for your communication and see that moment as an opportunity for you to clarify your point by expressing it in a different way. So this is what it means by putting it in other words. The interlocutor's lack of understanding often may not be related to your pronunciation or grammar or word choice. So don't worry, but it can relate to the lack of contextual cues or additional information that help your listeners understand your intended point. So when you see your partners are puzzled or confused, it's not merely about the way you pronounce the words or your grammar mastery or your vocabulary. It can be due to other factors right? So regardless of the factors that makes your speaking partners confused or puzzled during the conversation, we need to know how to clarify our comment by putting it in other words or different way. And here are the expressions or phrases that you can use. Repeat after me. I mean, good. To put it another way, good. What I'm trying to say is, yes. The point I'm trying to make is, good job. Let me put it another way. Yes. In other words, good. My point is that the point I'm trying to make is, next one. That's not really what I was asking. My question is about, good. Perhaps I didn't make my question clear. What I asked was, good. I understand your point, but I think you've answered a slightly different question. What I would like to know is, good job. So there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 phrases that we can use to clarify our comment by putting it in other words or in a different way, right? Without putting it in a different way or in other words, we're not clarifying our comment. We're just repeating it without making changes that may be helpful for our speaking partner to understand it more clearly. The same questions that I asked you have asked you for 3 times. Please do it again. Now it's time for you to construct your own expressions in how you can clarify your comment by putting it in other words. Please use your own wordings that may be more comfortable for you, right? Or you can modify the expressions that I provided on the previous slide, but with some changes with your own diction or vocabulary, right? And the next 2 questions are the same. So from the previous slide, you can see the list of phrases, useful phrases that we can use to clarify our comment by putting it in other words. So I want you to group them. Which ones are expressions that you are familiar with already, or the ones that you usually use, and which expressions are new to you? Please separate them, analyze them, reflect on them, reflect on your experience, which one are new, which one are not new. So when you know which one are new and which one are not, you know that you need to practice this list of new expressions in your next involvement in group settings, right? So you can enrich your repertoire, you can make your expressions various, and you're not only using the same expression over and over again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that's about the mechanics of the language that we need to master about small group settings, right? And for the next section, it's about different topic, which is about strategies for success. There will be some strategies for you in nailing participation in small group setting, but make sure you have completed all the questions and exercise I provided to you in this section too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so now we enter the last section of this lecture 3, which is about strategies for success. So far we have covered mastering of the mechanics of the languages, covering asking for repetition, seeking clarification or elaboration, paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding, and clarifying your comment by putting it in other words. And last but not least, is strategies for success. So with all the situations given in participating in small group setting 1, and with all the mechanics of the languages, we still need to learn and master the strategies for succeeding this conversation, to succeed our communication in this kind of a communication setting. And there are 3 strategies covered in this section. The first one is introducing oneself to a group. Number 2 is tips on asking questions. And the last one is more tips on participating in small group settings. So without further ado, let's start with the first strategies, which is introducing oneself to a group. When it comes to academic conversation in small group settings, the first potential challenge that many students face is self-introduction in a group situation, especially if it is still a new meeting or the forum or the discussion just started, right? The moderator or the leader of the discussion may ask you to introduce yourself. And this can be a big challenge for those who are not used to speaking in front of public or speaking in a big forum like this. As the instructor goes around the room or while you are waiting for your turn, your heart may start pounding, and then your palms may get sweaty, your tongue may get dry, and your breath may become shallow. Have you ever experienced such situation? This seemingly easy situation actually has all the ingredients that increase apprehension for most people. The formality of the situation, the anticipation of your turn coming up, the feeling of wanting to escape from the situation, like you feel you want to disappear from the situation, the time pressure that you might be under, and becoming the center of attention among an unfamiliar group of people in unfamiliar surroundings. Yeah. It can be very challenging. It can be very even threatening for some people to speak in front of forum whose people or whose members are unknown or new, right? So the feeling is like, escape from the situation or just disappear. So you don't need to speak in front of those people. But don't worry, I've got some strategies to overcome this kind of situation problems. Here is an easy to follow plan for you to get ready to put your best foot forward in creating the right impression when you introduce yourself to a group. So mastering the strategies is not only to help you, to be able to participate in the small group setting, but it's also about leaving a good impression to the people that you just talked to. So here are the steps that you can use to introduce yourself to a group. Number 1, to recognize, acknowledge that it is normal to feel nervous. You're not alone. Although you feel very nervous, but believe me that it's not only you. Every other members may feel the same thing, may feel nervous too. To help you, this one, plan a simple sequence for introducing yourself. The sequence of content of your introduction. And here are 2 sample sequences. First one, say your name slowly, especially if you are from other countries. How people in a certain country is named can be very complex or difficult to understand for the citizen of other countries. So please say your name slowly. Not that you are familiar with your name, but others may not be. For example, I'm blah, 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 my name is blah, blah, blah. It's just like a normal introduction. I will give you a full version of the introduction after this. After you say your name, say the main thing you want others to know. I'm here to, I will give you the examples after this. And finally, conclude. I'm looking forward to what? What do you expect from the discussion, or what do you expect from the topic of the discussion? And another sequence can involve this thing. State your name, position, and affiliation. If you are from a certain university, say your university name. Then say where you are from and how long you have been in the country. And then state the main thing you would like others to know, and then share any other relevant piece of information about yourself, and then finally conclude. If you want to share relevant piece of information about yourself, make sure it's something that you're comfortable other people to know, right? If you think that it's too personal, don't share it. I will show you the examples of the introduction, and after that, I want you to make your own. For example, I'm Maria. My name is Maria Dewi Rosari. I'm here to represent my university, which is Jakarta International University. I'm looking forward to having a further discussion with you regarding the research interests we share in common, right? So say the name and then the main thing that I want others to know, and finally conclude. Now it's your turn. Make your own introduction. You can follow the sequence in A or even in B, or if you wanna, combine both two, that would be great. Pause this video for a while so that you have enough time to make your own introduction. And after that, practice that as if you were really in a group discussion in which you have to introduce yourself. Whenever you're finished, continue to the next slide. Step number 3, take a few deep breaths while waiting to speak. Deep breath. Don't take the shallow ones. Number 4, start speaking after you inhale. Then speak. Do not do otherwise. Do not speak after you exhale. Why so? Because starting to speak after you exhale creates a shortness of breath that can exacerbate the nervousness or anxiety associated with speaking. So you will catch a breath if you force yourself to speak after you exhale. So remember to start speaking after you inhale. If you think you need to give a very short pause before you start speaking, please do so. Remember that silence is not always interpreted as something bad in a communication. Okay, and not all people, not all of your audience will interpret your silence as a bad signal from you. Number 5, smile and use a relaxed posture to convey approachability. So when you are introducing yourself, you need to make sure that your vibe, your body gestures, simply your atmosphere is, showing that you are approachable, that will indicate to other people that you are a friendly person, you're a fun person, and maybe that will result with someone who wants to have a, a small talk with you or conversation with you later, right? And don't forget to smile. Number 6, try making eye contact with people in all corners of the room throughout your introduction. So make sure that you distribute your eye contact evenly to all corners of the room. Do not stare at one certain corner of the room and you ignore the others, right? Just spread your eye contact. It means that you are greeting all the audience in the room. Number 7, end confidently. Avoid the temptation to end your introduction as soon as you can, or to use weak exits such as, well, I guess that's it, or that's all. End it confidently, and you're sure, confidently or surely, right? So do not rush in ending your introduction, but do not make your introduction too long. All right, so just keep it in a moderate length of time. Enjoy it. If you need to inhale, just inhale. If you need to create a short pause during your introduction, please do so and end it confidently and leave a good impression. All right, that's the strategies for introducing yourself to a group. The next one is about strategies on asking questions. So in a group discussion, there will be like presentation or material delivery, like that. And after that, there will be Q&A usually, right? And we as the participants are usually encouraged to take a part in the Q&A, in the discussion, right? And then the discussion requires us to ask and answer questions. But for some people, it will be challenging to ask questions, especially if you're from a low context culture. Like asking questions, taking initiative is something that you are not familiar with, right? But if you already, decide that you want to take part in an academic situation, academic discussion, or in a small group setting, you need to force yourself to ask questions. And if you find it challenging and difficult, take a look at the following strategies. The first one, be the first to ask a question. Well, it is very challenging when the moderator or the leader of the discussion open the Q&A and being the first person to ask is like, yeah, it's a challenging moment, right? But it is recommended to ask the question first, as the first person who do that. Why so? Let's find out the reason. Many students share the sentiments of fear and anxiety about asking a question that may sound stupid to others. Yes, this is one of the common problems about asking a question in a forum. Be the first to raise a question because as the discussion progresses, participation often becomes increasingly complex and difficult if you're new to this academic practice. So when the Q&A is just opened or started, be the first to ask a question, because as the discussion is rolling, the discussion will be more intense and more complex, and you will be more challenged to ask questions, especially if you are new to this academic situation. After you have asked a question, you will often feel more at ease and involved, and gradually your confidence about raising questions will be enhanced through the successful small steps that you have made. The first step will sound scary, but gradually you will gain more confidence. Just give it a try. And then the next one, exercise effective listening skills, just like what we discussed in the previous lecture. It is important so that you can ask questions that are related to the comments being made or to the subject being discussed. For example, questions that are important to developing the discussion. So when you are able to, to do effective listening skills, the way you construct the questions will be more, appropriate, and your questions that you propose will sound more important to the development of the discussion. It's just not like just any question like that. Next one, prepare questions in advance. Being able to pose questions that facilitate the flow of discussions by exercising effective listening skills and to sharply question assigned materials in seminar discussions contribute to group members' learning. So when you ask a question, it's not only beneficial for you, but it can also be beneficial or even very important to your audience. Your audience may not be able to, find the need to ask that questions. And when you ask the question, they will result in like, aha, I think I need to ask that questions too. Or aha, I don't think I also have understood that thing too. Right? So your questions can contribute to the group members' learning too. And then to that end, commit to preparing some good questions. To be able to generate questions that are also important to other audience, you need to prepare some good questions in advance. So before the Q&A started, you can write down your questions in a note, and when the session is open, you are ready to post your questions. Consider different types of questionings and ask questions that reflect reason, focus, and clarity. The key to effective discussion is preparation. The more prepared you are, the less apprehensive you will feel about participating. You will also get more out of the discussion. So if you know that you will have an academic discussion coming up and you know the topic, you can prepare yourself first. You can, read more articles or journals or books that are related to the topic of the discussion so that you have more background knowledge, right? When you have more background knowledge, it will be easier for you to relate to the content of the discussion, and you will be more able to generate questions that are important and beneficial for you and for other participants. Next one, be precise and concise. Being precise means when you ask a question, you are straight to the point. And being concise means you propose a brief question, not a very long narrative question. Your audience will get bored of listening to you. Avoid rambling on and on or taking too long to get to the point if that tends to be your conversational style. If you're not sure about what type of conversational style you have, you may ask your friend or your colleague to listen to you when you're asking a question and ask them to give comment or to evaluate the way you ask a question. The next one, use natural words. Only use words that come naturally to you. When you participate in academic discussion in your department, focus your attention on getting your message and idea across. Don't shift your focus on like selecting a high level of words or sophisticated words. If that's not your natural vocabulary or natural words of choice, don't use that. You will sound awkward and you will, spend too much time thinking of the sophisticated words that you think you need to use. Focus on speaking to express rather than impress. The next step is use appropriate intonation. So the content of your question is very important, but using the right intonations is too. It is equally important. You need to use appropriate intonation. If you are asking someone a question that challenges the person's comments, make sure that you don't elevate your voice or sound like you are attacking the person. Remember, you are asking a question. You are not looking for an enemy. Do not try to speak as if you were, attacking someone, even though you think you don't really like the person. Do not show it. Still respect them and mind your intonation so that your question can be, conveyed well. So that's about tips on asking questions. The next one, we move to more tips on participating in small group settings. When you're trying to persuade your audience in a discussion, it is important that you try not to be combative. Try to understand other points of view and keep in mind the following points. So when we are aware that we are in a group discussion, we need to keep reminding ourselves that other people may have different points of view. Other people may have different way of seeing something, and we have to understand and respect that, because we also want that other people to respect and to understand our points of view, right? And here are some tips for you. The first one, be prepared. Establish credibility or believability with the audience. You are considered reliable if you are knowledgeable on all sides of the issue. That's why I recommended you to, read more books or articles related to the topic of the discussion in advance, right? One of the ways to become knowledgeable is to be prepared. Do all the readings, and whenever possible, go beyond the readings on the topic. Next tip, don't confuse fact with opinion. And when you think and know if what you're saying is just your opinion, not fact or based on data, you need to be aware of that. Never confuse fact with opinion. We have to be able to differentiate fact from opinion. Fact is based on data and it's provable, while opinion is more subjective. So understand the underlying complexity of issues and do not simply take things for granted because that's just the way it is. Next strategy is provide well-established evidence. Provide well-established evidence that relates to the issue under discussion. Make sure that the evidence you present is well supported in the literature and that your conclusions are based on the facts you provide. So that's why, again, it's important to have some readings before the group discussion so that you have more bigger knowledge, you have compiled more evidence, more proof, more facts. So you will sound more reliable and knowledgeable to your audience. Studies have shown that others are much more likely to be influenced by a statement of facts that explain. This is why I came to the conclusion I reached. Right? Next one, provide a logical sequence. Provide answers and present your arguments in a logical sequence. Yeah, especially because it's an academic discussion, right? It's very important to show the logical sequence, the logical, relations from one thing to another. Many students have found that jotting down keywords for each point and numbering them help accomplish that goal. So if you find it difficult or challenging to keep a logical sequence, you may use the help of a note. So you write down the points. Say there are 5 points that you want to deliver, right? And you need to make sure that all those 5 points are ordered in a logical sequence. So you can use your note. Number 1, what you need to say. Number 2, what you need to say until number 5. So when it comes to the time when you have to, present it, you can just easily follow your note. And when you are able to follow your note, you will be able to convey your opinions or your ideas in a logical sequence. Next one, show enthusiasm. It's also important. Your audience or listeners will be more interested if they see your enthusiasm. And how to show enthusiasm? Your body gestures, your facial expressions, right? Your non-verbal cues, all of them, they are not speaking a word, but they are speaking a lot about your spirit, about your enthusiasm, about your excitement in the discussion. Next one, don't get defensive. Defend your position when justified, but don't get defensive, especially when your ideas and your opinions are proven to be wrong or incorrect like that. Don't get defensive. People will respect us more if we acknowledge that if we were wrong or we need to read further about the thing that we just talked about. Next one, don't interrupt. Let the other person state his or her case and listen to his or her point of view. In expressing disagreement, avoid interrupting someone before he or she is finished. So just treat others just like how we want to be treated, right? We don't like other people to interrupt us when we speak, right? And don't do the same thing to others. And be willing to change a point of view. be an open-minded person. Be willing to make changes in your point of view based on new information. Don't be someone with close-minded, especially if the topic of the discussion, is new to you, is new to us. So we need to, keep an open mind and be willing to change a point of view or to change the way we see something. That's the last strategy for success about taking a part in small group setting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap. So that's all that we need to cover in this lecture 3. So let me conclude. So we have discussed the mechanics of the language about asking a question in a various types, asking for repetition, seeking clarification or elaboration, paraphrasing ideas to confirm understanding, and clarifying your comment by putting it in other words. And after that, we have discussed strategies for success, covering introducing ourselves to a group, tips on asking questions, and more tips on participating in small group settings, the one that we just finished. If you want to read more about the material for lecture 3, you can go to this book on those pages. Well, I think that's all for this lecture 3. Thank you so much for joining this lecture and for participating, especially when I asked you to answer questions, to share your ideas, to write down your ideas like that. Please keep it up. And in the next lecture, lecture 4, we are going to learn about the applications, about the materials that we covered in this lecture. Well, I'm Maria Dewi Rosari from Jakarta International University. Thank you, and I will see you in lecture 4. Goodbye.